Hey, so it's the first video I've made in a little while, and that's been down to a few reasons. First, illness. Secondly, more happily, the completion of the Legacy project, which has been massive. It's a year-long coaching and leadership training that we've designed, I've written, we've completed with the first cohort. Huge sense of life purpose, life dharma, thing that I've gotten off my chest. So that's been huge. And then the third thing is that Adelia and I have been planning a trip to the USA. So in just over a little week from now, we're going to be flying from Bali through Australia over to LA, and we're going to host a number of different events in California, in New York City, and also in South Florida. So details of all of that below. We'll do some more introductory type events, and we're also going to do a couple of weekend coaching deep dives for those that are interested. So have a little browse in the calendar that I've linked to below, and you can poke around and find out all the details there. So in the meantime, I want to talk a little bit about the thing that's been most on my mind, and I've become very, very interested in the journey to soul. I think I might have spoken a little bit about this on the channel, but maybe not so much. And there's a fantastic model that I got from Bill Plotkin, who talks about, he calls it the three-dimensional ego, and he talks about humanity and human consciousness works in three different dimensions. And first of all, he talks about the middle world, and that is the ego as we know it. And the ego is on a journey, if we choose to engage in such a journey, the ego is on a journey of development. It can mature and develop and broaden and become more wise, more whole, more benevolent, more inclusive as the human being develops along the horizontal axis of his life. But then we also have the spiritual journey, and Bill Plotkin says there are two different spiritual journeys. And one is the kind of spiritual journey that you would hear about from Eastern mysticism and the different ways that you might meditate to experience the transcendent. And so these are spiritual journeys that are looking to take you above and beyond the common ego and sit in some kind of witness position or samadhi or state of enlightenment, perfection, sublimity above the hustle and bustle and pain and neurosis of being a human ego in a human body in a human civilization. So that's very, very appealing. I've done my fair share of meditation retreats and meditation practice. And yes, for sure, the more I sit in states of deep presence, transcending the thought patterns of the recursive mind, it's not to say that the mind turns off completely and you're just sat there in a bliss, but the mind quietens down to such a kind of relatively small volume that the state of presence that you're enjoying, peace, joy, confidence, discernment, strength, compassion, love, is so big and so almost tangible that you can witness your ego self and just let it be. You're not triggered into acting upon habits or anything. You can just watch yourself and your tendencies float on by without having to do any of them. So it's a very beautiful thing to exercise this upper world dimension and follow this spiritual journey towards greater abstraction, greater witnessing, and greater, in a way, kind of separation from life. And obviously from presence, from non-duality, you can act much more skillfully within life because you're not caught up in it. But that's not the only spiritual journey. There is another spiritual journey. Rather than heading up into the upper world, into the transcendent and the sublime, there is the spiritual journey of going downwards, beneath actually the contours of the day-to-day ego. And rather than seeking this kind of abstract liberation, one is tracking and looking for clues of and feeling into and almost courting a sense of human soul. And this is very different because it's not egoic. The soul is something beyond and deeper than the ego, but it's not spiritual in a sense. There's a way in which the human soul is not defined by its universality, but is incredibly unique. And so for many years, I didn't believe in the human soul. You know, Tooth Fairy, Father Christmas, growing up in a rational kind of scientific-minded household, I threw the notion of the soul out with everything else, right? When I stopped believing in religion and so on. But soul keeps on cropping up in our language again and again as something we kind of sense is true. Soul music. That music has soul. That film has soul. That person, they speak to my soul. You sold your soul to the devil, or you're working in a soulless corporation. You might not believe that there is, or you have such thing as a human soul, yet you seem to really mean it when you bring it up in language and phrases like this. And I think the intuition is correct, that there's something actually deep within our kind of animal being, which is incredibly unique and incredibly primal, in that it exists before the adaptations of the human ego and is more a reflection of our original authentic self. So courting the soul is a very interesting spiritual practice, certainly for me, because even though I can find this great kind of peace and joy when I lift up and meditate, and I actually have no desire really to change anything about my life when I go up and meditate, and I find myself relating to things as they are with much more ease. Actually, the more I dip into this area, this depth of soul, the underworld of the human psyche and experience, I actually gain clues which give me more energy, more sense of direction, more sense of vitality, and crucially meaning for life. It's what am I here on this earth to do? Spirituality doesn't, in the upper world sense, doesn't really answer those questions, but a tracking and a curiosity of soul actually gives me much more answer to those questions. And so the practices for diving into one's soul are very different from the practices of spirituality. Meditation is still very useful and so on, but you've got the vision quest, you've got dream tracking, dream analysis, you've got the ways in which art and the particular images that you might discover over the course of your life energize you. And so I spoke with Prem on a beautiful podcast episode recently about why is it that at the age of 20, 15 or whatever it is, you might watch a movie that doesn't make sense to you because your mind's not ready to grasp what the concepts are all about, but there are images or something about the narrative of the film, or maybe just a few freeze frames or moments that haunt you, actually. And it might take 15 or 20 years until your mind catches up to understand why has that piece of art had an indelible influencing force on your psyche. Very, very interesting. And so these are kind of spiritual questions with a whole sense of personhood and individuality. And I think one of the key aspects of soul that I'm certainly feeling into is the sense that a soul is either always longing for an experience of life which is more soulful, more true, that feels like the right place. I'm in the right place with the right people doing the right thing. The soul is always longing or yearning for more of that lived soulfulness, or the soul is actually belonging. And there's a sense of the human being belonging somewhere, and that very often is belonging to a place, a community, an area, a nation, a patch of land, an ecosystem. And sometimes that's a soul belonging to a lineage of sorts, maybe a family lineage, maybe a sense of cultural lineage, a vocation, an art or a form of artisania. You belong to great generations of men and women that have come from you before, and you ride on their essence. Their work, their being imprints a certain energetic force within you that you take into yourself and you are nourished by and you move with you. So again, very different to meditation and detachment. This is much more about radically longing for and belonging to the earth and community and other people. So these kind of Buddhist notions of attachment, detachment, don't get attached, attachment is a root of suffering. Here it's like sure, actually, your attachment to the world might cause a lot of suffering, but it's actually through human suffering that soul is forged. And if you look at the roots of some of the great musical traditions in the world and the great musical areas, you'll see that people have come through tremendous suffering, which has sculpted their character in a certain way, that huge depths of the human existential condition is apparent through their song, their art form, and their dance. And by contrast, those of us who remain in the middle world, the soulless corporation, the education that's had all sense of humanities and classics stripped out of it, right? We find it much more difficult to create, if we ever would, create or resonate or find good life-affirming art. And by contrast, life feels somewhat empty. So the fullness of life, meaning, belonging, all comes through this journey into soul. And as I say, your dreams, your vision quest, but also noticing your wounding, your projections on other people. But the things that you most crave as an animal human being, what are those things? What did you most love when you were a child, before you got conditioned or matured out of it? What creates a fundamental energy within you? And so I've spoken a lot on this channel about embodiment, which is how can I bring awareness out of my mind and into my body so I can read the subtle signals of my body and be a mind that now has other forms of knowing, infusing itself into my decision making, my way of operating in life. There's a new word, ensoulment, which I've been coming across. Ensoulment. What is it if I allow the awareness and the rationale of my mind to have a direct access, a direct two-way communication with the soul within me? This deep, numinous, pre-human, primal, almost animal quality of essence. What if my mind can feel into what my soul desires and longs for and is made up from, and receive that knowledge and make decisions and move through the world accordingly? It's a very interesting thought, because it can change everything about where I'm headed and how I treat my work and my relationships. And then an even more radical idea around ensoulment is, what if I feel into and live with the notion of soul in me so deeply that I can almost surrender the life's plans and strategies that my mind is making to the soul, i.e., I'm no longer living a mental life, but I'm fully living my soul's life. I just employ that sense of ego as something that can help make rational decisions in middle world tasks, but fundamentally I'm living the life of the yearnings and the excitements and the aliveness of my soul. Now Jung, when he started to articulate his notions of psyche and soul, would talk very much about having a personal myth. What is my personal myth? And he writes this beautiful quote where, and I realized all of a sudden that I wasn't living my personal myth, I didn't have one, and I had to, above all else, set out in order to find it. So again, there's this recognition in Jung that continues to nowadays with the whole kind of notion of the hero's journey and the underworld journey. The building a sense of myth or narrative of one's life is taking ourselves away from identifying solely with this middle world concerns, career, status, whether other people like you or not, material, possessions, trophies, nice holidays, and so on. But seeing your life as in the form of a soul's narrative, which is, this was my soul at the beginning, this is what I got preloaded with, these are the things that I love, this is the shape, the flavor, the particular song of my soul. If I were to create art, it's all encoded with the particular soul DNA that is me, or that it is you. We start off with that. In childhood, we suffer wounds, some of them very, very deep. And then we might go, for the ones who are called, we might go on a form of existential quest, which is, I don't want to live in the world with my true self, my soul's suppressed, and I don't want to live in the world kind of reactive to and overcompensating for the sense of childhood wounding. I'm going to go off on this wild journey and pick up the pieces I need so I can come to the other side as an adult human with a soul that's aligned. Why go to the pains of making a YouTube video and sit here talking with you for 15 minutes sharing these things? Very, very simply, if you don't feel this already, that to live a life aligned with your own sense of soul is important, then I will add that to discover any sense of meaning, any sense of deep alignment, any sense of truly being energized in an important and compelling way that allows you to walk the earth with a very deep sense of conviction, soul force, and to have a life where you feel that you really belong, that you belong in your life, in the communities that you live in, to the people that you're close with, there needs to be this integration of the living, breathing soul, and a powerful forming of a narrative that has you understand the wider context of your journey. A lot of people, again, you see this in Viktor Frankl, but a lot of people who struggle or hit a crisis of meaning in their lives, which is happening a lot around the people that I know and around my age, late 30s, early 40s, the crisis of meaning is one of, I never understood for myself a deeper narrative for why I'm here and what I could be, and therefore how I can give something truly meaningful to the world. So, meaning, energy, conviction, passion, belonging. It comes from the underworld journey, and not so much from the meditate yourself into ecstasy every day. I was interested, and maybe I'll put this in a different video. If I think back over my life, there are a few moments where I felt I was really living my proper life in such a radiant and fantastic way that there are certain chapters that are engraved in my psyche, in my soul. That's how I'd naturally say. They're engraved in my soul forever, and I'll remember them as I'm dying as being the core moments of my life. Certain places in the world. It's in Sao Paulo, interestingly. I lived in Rio and it didn't touch me, but something about the soulfulness, the connectivity, the belonging, the invitation of the people of Sao Paulo, and more the interior parts of Brazil, had me really pulled in. I lived an adventure. I was primed. I don't know. I fell in love a lot during this time. Did I fall in love a lot because I was living in a soulful place or living in a soulful way and that allowed me to fall in love? Or did I fall in love and now I start projecting and mythologizing the experience I had in Sao Paulo, that it was a soulful experience because I fell in love? I don't know. I think you see that falling in love and a radically surrendering and opening the heart to falling in love with something is a direct path to soul. Whether it happens from the soul to the heart or from the heart to the soul, I don't know. But why are we drawn to certain places at certain times in our lives? Certain cultures, certain people. It's almost like the whisper of the name of a certain place on the wind touches something so deeply that I know that I've got to go there. A few clues and symbols add up and all of a sudden I'm buying a flight ticket. And I had a season of my life also, Colorado, USA, northern Thailand. I lived in for a while. Such a slowness and kind of fusion of myself with the land, with the place, with the culture, with the people that gave birth to this incredible sense of wonder, connection, belonging. And some people have this with their homeland. Some people have this with places that they see along the way. What is the true human life? I was speaking with my partner yesterday. I think humans have been nomads for as much of our history as we have been kind of landlubbers or dwellers. So there's something about deeply belonging to a land which is part of soul, but something to being a wanderer or a nomad that is also an essential part of this as well. So here I'm starting to come to my frothy edges of understanding, and if you like this conversation, come and meet us. Stay involved with the channel, come and meet us at some of the live events if you can, if you're in the States. But this is really the conversation that I want to be having with people, particularly in a coaching vein, Because if you're at a point in your life where there is a dryness or a lack of existential meaning and vitality, it's probably not because you're not skillful enough at something. And what you probably don't need is more self-improvement to try and turn yourself into the fully integrated Superman in every single domain of your life. I think what is needed is a much more brave and courageous look into the things that you absolutely want to be pursuing before you die, and finding yourself in the very, for me, I feel it as a very much almost a terrifying, full of fear precipice between living my true life that my soul longs for and living the life that I know is going to be kind of safe from a status ego level. That's the conversation I invite you into. So if you have any remarks, please comment, and I'll invite you to consider these questions about your soul and the things that you already on a deep level belong to, and that you would love to devote your life to just sink into as the source of you coming fundamentally alive. All right, see you in the next video.